Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. I am Armin Nelson, Mayor of Champlin. I have the honor of serving as moderator for tonight's North Metro Mayors Association Senate District 36 Legislative Forum. The North Metro Mayors Association was created in 1987 as a nonpartisan organization advocating for issues and opportunities of importance to the Twin City northern suburbs, citizens, and city councils. Our goal in sponsoring tonight's legislative candidate forum for Senate District 36 is to provide residents with an opportunity to learn about the candidates' ideas and positions on issues that we believe are important to the future of our communities. We will have 3 forums, 1 for each office. We will pose 4 prepared questions. Candidates were advised of the topics of not a specific question before the forum. Responses will be in rotating order with set limits on their answers. We note that these limits are maximums and not minimums. We regret that we cannot cover all the issues of interest tonight due to time constraints, but we will focus on city and state governance, transportation, and finance questions. We expect there will be other forums where these other issues may be addressed. We will also solicit questions from the audience. We will use as many of those questions as time permits. Please write your questions down on note cards and give them to the North Metro Mayor's staff, who will forward them to me. Questions will be addressed to each candidate, so please refrain from asking specific questions from each candidate. Let's get started tonight, and we'll introduce our candidates for Senate District 36. We have Senator John Hoffman, and we have Mayor Jeff Lundy. Thank you again for being here tonight. At this time, we'll have opening statements, and each candidate will have a maximum of 2 minutes. And we'll start with Jeff.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank everybody here for helping put on this forum. It's nice to be able to have a chance to discuss items that are before us. My name is Jeff Lundy. I'm currently the mayor of Brooklyn Park, candidate for state senate. As mayor, I've been privileged to lead the most diverse large city in this state, focusing on issues in front of us, things that need to be finished and completed. Really a results-focused mayor where I have taken the city to many areas that it hasn't had before. Things like lowering crime by a third. Things like bringing over $1 billion of development along Highway 610. And now more than anything, restoring pride by pulling people together of this diverse city so that the approval, what people believe in their city, went from 65% to over 90%. And we do that by a diverse segment of Minnesotans who have come together with a common purpose. And that's simply missing in St. Paul. And that's one of the reasons I miss running. We need to have a results-focused state legislature, one that can work with each other, that can look past the partisanship and get things done. Things like tax cuts that are left undone that would have provided needed money for seniors, for college students. Transportation bills that fell victim to people deciding that interests outside of our district were more important than ours. What we need is leadership that will work with people who understand that common ground should be the first thing that we pass, and then we can argue over the extra things. As your state senator, my focus would be on what this district needs, not party politics, not partisanship.
All right, thank you. John?
Thank you, Mayor Nelson, and thank you to the North Metro Mayors Association for sponsoring the Legislative Candidate Forum today in this beautiful city of Champlin, Minnesota. It's unlike across the river, this is where the sun sets and rises. Isn't that was the joke when I was on the school board, was where does the sun set and rise? And with that, I had spent 8 years previously on the Anoka-Hennepin School Board, and the last 3 years it's vice chair. And one of the things that we talked about at the very beginning of those times on the school board was, why was it okay for the state to tell school districts to borrow money? $2.6 billion taxpayer dollars were borrowed in order to pay for our education. What we did when I was elected in 2012 is we paid that back the first year, the first time in the history, and we did that in a bipartisan manner. That's always been the mantra that I've had, is the bipartisan manner, with over 76% of my bills being bipartisan, and the efforts that we've had both in looking at the Brooklyn Park Armory and the Mill Pond here in Champlin, as well as Highway 10 with the Armstrong Bridge, that was all done in a bipartisan manner. Let me back up and tell you a little bit about my background. In 2001, I was appointed by U.S. Secretary of Education Rodney Page to serve on the Federal Interagency Coordinating Council. And there I served 3 years on a commission that was advising and assisting the secretaries on health and education regarding children and families birth to 8. In 2005, I was elected to the Anoka Hennepin School Board and served that for 8 years until my election in 2012. I am a Champlin resident, and I love to serve the district of Senate District 36 of Champlin, Coon Rapids, and Brooklyn Park. And thank you for your time this evening.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. At this time, we'll go on to our prepared questions. This will be done in a rotating manner with a rebuttal opportunity. There'll be a time limit of 2 minutes for your answer, and then there'll be a 45-second rebuttal opportunity. So with that, and the first question is, what are the top 3 issues you hear while campaigning? And if elected, what will you do to ensure that the 2017 Senate and House members work in a collaborative way with the governor and the community to address those issues? And we'll start with you, Jeff.
Thank you. By far, I've spent most of my campaign time knocking on doors, talking to people. I haven't been sending out letters. I haven't been sending back, hoping that people will notice me. I've been out there talking to people and listening to what they're looking at, what they're thinking the state legislature has failed to do. The bonding bill failure was catastrophic. People can talk about how we need more money. Well, you could start by stop digging a hole. We're in a hole. We have lots of years of transportation needs and bonding projects. When we talk about the mill pond, it's half complete because the other half of the bonding bill didn't get done. We have a road that should have been widened, Highway 10. We had a handsome boulevard at grade crossing to help with that oil trains that seemed to go through that city and cut it in half. And yet again, you'd think in an election year that we could pull people together and actually pass this bill, and it didn't get done. People are really afraid of health care. They're now required to purchase it, but yet the costs are going up. How would you love it if we all said you have to buy Coca-Cola every day? And Coca-Cola decided it was going to raise prices by doubling it. And then the next week it's going to double again. And that's what's happening with health care. Last year was a 30% increase. This year it's a 50% increase. Last year I was one of those families who bought individual family insurance and watched our rates go up and up. It went from 600 to 830. This year it was going to go up to 1,200. And you know what it covered? Absolutely nothing. But I was forced to have it because that's what the government decides that we need to have, even though I didn't use it. And the last thing is taxes. My opponent was a swing vote on a $2 billion tax increase. Last week in Brooklyn Park, he said he wouldn't tax clothing. He did already tax clothing. We raised taxes on the middle class across the board. People like to say it was just a tax on the wealthy. I tell you, middle class and lower income people buy clothing, they buy services, they pay for auto repairs, they buy over-the-counter medication. All of these were taxes that were increased. And all we ask is in a surplus, you could return some of that money back to us.
All right, thank you. John?
The same issues that come up on the doors in 2016 are the same issues I heard in 2012. And I'm going to start with one that's most important to our area of the Osseo and the Anoka Hennepin school districts that represent Brooklyn Park, Champlin, and Coon Rapids, and that's education, specifically equity of education. And that's why it was important in 2012 when I brought the equalization bill that actually brought property tax relief for the first time since 1992, that was saying to the constituents within our 2 school districts in the 3 communities that for the first time we're going to equalize your property taxes and give you that little bit, which then you don't have to leverage so much local money in order to get the same amount of money from the state. That's a 2-hour conversation, but I'd be more than happy to have that. What I'm hearing from people at the doors now is thank you for continually putting our school districts #1 in your arguments, John. Thank you for bringing us all-day, everyday kindergarten. Thank you for standing up for the compensatory education model that was being destroyed and taken away, and thank you for putting that priority first. Thank you for doing what you did regarding keeping education #1 when it comes to this part of our wonderful North Metro area. And that piece of education is important because as we're looking at people with good jobs in the future, we want to have those folks graduating from our schools and moving on to career and college readiness. Speaking of which, the second thing we always hear about is higher education. The cost of higher education is beyond, and so that's why bringing the tax credits that I have and the fact that we've now invested for the first time in over 10 years to our higher education, we know that dividend pays itself off. And the third thing we talk about is I hear the partisanship on the federal level. In order to get the education and health and human services bills that I had passed this past 4 years, it had to be done in a bipartisan manner. The record's very clear. I have been that way, and I will continue to be that way.
All right, thank you. Jeff, you get a 45-second rebuttal.
I like the first answer first. Then we're good.
Okay.
My rebuttal is, we talked about the equity in education, and we look at the results in the state, and we look at how the gaps are continuing. We look at how that people are not being served well, and we start to lose focus. We should be concentrating our resources on those kids who need the help, targeted scholarships. We need to work with all providers in cities. I don't know what the state legislature thought by declaring war on the daycare industry, but that's what people who run daycares feel like. They've been told they need to unionize. They've been told they need to do this. They've been told that we're going to take kids out of your business and put them in school. And I'm not sure how that would help move us forward. These people know and care for those kids, and we need to partner with all hands on deck to help shrink this gap.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know where you're getting your data from, Jeff, but let's be very clear about a couple of things. When it comes to equity education, Anoka Hennepin School District and the Osseo School District have shown through the work that we've done with the bills that I've brought forward and the bills that were put in place by people like Jim Mabler, Kathy Tingelstad, Denise Dietrich, Melissa Hortman, Mark Uglum right here. Those bills do produce end results, and those end results were showing that we went to an 11% on closing the achievement gap. We tried to make that statewide, and we know that goes right toward the youth. And the other one is the targeting those high poverty areas with it comes to early childhood. We've done that, we did that, and we're seeing great results because the benchmarks in first, second, and third grade are being moved.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. The next question, if elected, which committee would you seek to serve on and why? And we'll start with you, John.
Thank you. As a freshman, it was a privilege to be picked to serve on the Education E12, both the policy and finance. And that was important to me because of where I came from in both my federal and my local history regarding education. And understanding the education formula is not an easy thing to understand, but really understanding what good policy looks like is even more important. I would hope that I could serve on that Education E12 committee, again, both the finance and the policy. And along with that, the other ones that I would like to serve and continually serve on are health, human services, and housing policy. And that was important because when we look at the silver tsunami, which is no longer just coming, it's actually here and part of us, what do our policies look like regarding our most serious when it comes to our most vulnerable and our aging population? And I've carried lots of bills that became law in that as well. And having those great discussions, that's a complex. When you're talking birth to death in health and human services, that's good. Another one is environment and energy. I served as the vice chair. I would like to continue my work there. We have a great, unique system in Minnesota that no other states have when it comes to energy policy. Getting an advanced certificate in energy policy from the University of Idaho last summer was another step in understanding just what our policies could look like. And there's some really wonderful things that we're leading the nation on right here in Minnesota. I would like to continue my work as the Governor's Developmental Disability Chair, as well as the working on the Governor's Workforce Development Council, and also the work that I've done on fish and game and elections.
All right, thank you. Jeff?
I think the three committees I've been looking at, if allowed to, would be Health and Human Services and Housing. I want to take a good look at how we provide housing to all residents. Minnesota has some of the most segregated affordable housing, which also leads to segregated populations. You look at the demographics across this metro, and you'll see that it's pockets where you will see certain types demographics, and in the next city over there's almost none. And I think that concentration of poverty has led to an inability to help deal with some of the questions that have occurred in Minnesota. I would also like to serve on state and local government. I think there are many changes as a mayor that I see firsthand that we need to accomplish. Things like I want to reform the Met Council. My city is actually suing the Met Council exactly because of their policies. I want to take a look at how that was designed to run. It hasn't been modernized in over 40 years. It's time for that to happen. It needs to be a more elected body. Right now it has the power to tax. It has the power to issue sack and whack fees that hurt small businesses. There are businesses in my community that if they expand one room can find themselves at the mercy of a $25,000 fee just for one room. And when you're talking about small businesses owned by many or of diverse backgrounds, they don't have access to capital. I would also like to serve in transportation and public safety. I think more than anything right now, we're looking at a transportation issue that we need to stop digging deeper and start providing solutions. We need to take a look at how can we pay for that. We need the Met Council to start to look at how they operate their transit system. Transit needs to reflect the true cost of it. I think we need to have the transit system also collect fares from everybody. Other states do that. We don't. We use the honor system, which is great, but in the day, we need the operating revenue to help pay for that. I want to concentrate on this and other things and hope that we can work across party lines to get stuff done, get them through, so it's not just about talk and bills that I've authored, that it's actually things that get passed and implemented.
All right. Thank you, John. You get 45 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for that. You know, when you talk about 76% of my bills being bipartisan, as a freshman, and you can even go look at that, a lot of the bills that I carried were not only passed but had huge effect in the state of Minnesota. For example, as a freshman, I was asked to work on what is called rate methodology from Centers of Medicaid Services. That's a $3 billion Health and Human Services the bill that comes to the state of Minnesota that provides services and supports to our most vulnerable, people in our nursing homes, people that are getting work through day training programs, and folks that are in foster care systems. And there was nobody else that was called to do that. I called to do that and work in bipartisan manner with a Republican from the House named Jim Abler, and we worked together to make that system stretch out over 5 years, which corrected any harsh givings that would be to the state of Minnesota. That's the kind of work I've done, and I will continue doing that.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I think what a bill that my opponent doesn't want to talk about is the tax bill. That when you're the swing vote, when you vote against it and you change your mind and vote for it, and you're the vote that regarded that tax bill, that there's a question about that. People want to know, where did that money go? When you have a surplus, we sure the heck couldn't get it out of the state legislature, but they sure took it in. They've raised costs across all of the different endeavors. People are paying higher taxes. It's sold as a tax on the rich. It is not a tax on the rich. It is a tax on everyone. We have senior citizens who haven't had a COLA increase in years who are looking at these increases. We have people who support a gas tax, which will affect everybody, especially those at lower incomes. What we need is somebody who's going to work with that. And the last 2 years, when there's been a partisan divide, things have ground to a gridlock.
All right. Thank you. We'll go on to our next question. Both parties agree to increase funding is needed for road and transit system improvements. How would you propose those funds be raised? We'll start with you, Jeff.
Thank you. I think there's a few different ways. First and foremost, I do not support a gas tax. I look at, and when I'm talking to people, they're talking about making ends meet. They're talking about how they can watch their revenue, especially as they're a senior or retired person. Their health care costs are going up 30%. Their income's not going up 30%. They're watching all these increases come in, and they're not seeing how they're going to pay for everything. The one thing about a gas tax is it does hit everyone. There is no rich person pays the gas tax. We all pay the gas tax. What we also need to do is pass bonding bills when we have the opportunity to. Not passing the bonding bill means that what was a backlog before is even worse now. That means next year when we go to pass it, we're going to have more roads and bridges that need to be reconstructed, need to be repaired. The failure of that effort. My opponent signed a letter saying that he would not vote for the bonding bill unless it included money for the Southwest Metro LRT. That was a failure. Our district had needs. I didn't see the Southwest Metro state legislature sign a letter saying they were going to support our transportation needs. There comes a time when you're having a disagreement that you have to come down to what is the agreed upon. What are you going to get? If somebody says I want 4 of something, somebody says I want 5, at the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, you need to pass that 4. And we had a bonding bill. We had an agreement between Senator Bach and Speaker Dowd. And what happened was people added amendments at the last 15 minutes of the legislature, and we got nothing. You'd think in election year that we would have the opportunity to get a bonding bill, which is the mother's milk for states and counties and cities to get done.
Thank you. John?
I'd like to just to make a 45-second comment. I don't know, again.
We replace your 45-second comment
Afterwards? All right, well, I'll just, I'll go into my.
2 minutes.
I'll do that.
Come back.
I wasn't here at 6 o'clock. Thank you. I'll do that. You know, everyone agrees we do need to find a way to fix our bridges and our roads. And it's a $600 million bucket, so to speak, each year in the deficit that's in there. And that there is over a 10-year period, the discussion needs to happen that way. And when you look at it, some of the things we both agree that increased funding is needed. The disagreement is about how you're going to pay for that. I did vote against a gas tax because I did say that the gas tax doesn't fit our community well. One of the things that people aren't taking a look at is our area has been getting hosed when it comes to leased vehicle sales tax. Why aren't we having a conversation about how come we're not getting the equity in the funding that happens with leased vehicle sales tax, looking at flexibility within the leased vehicle sales tax? What about the bonding bills? And or the thing that comes to play is the newly created corridors of commerce in 2013, because we finally had a good budget, we created a corridors of commerce that was the same year that we had the tax bill, which that tax bill, I was the deciding vote, and at the end got to say yes, which brought LGA back to your to the mayor's committee here in Brooklyn Park. And so my question to that would be, what did you do with the money from LGA that we did put into that? And we'll talk about that later in my rebuttal. But leveraging in some different resources within the context of transportation need to happen. And I did give you the height of the leased vehicle sales, the corridors of commerce, which really is something that's important, and then the bonding bills that need to come into play, which is good. The other one is some good borrowing when we have good credit, and we do have good credit right now, and with that we can also look at some other efficiencies. But everything needs to be on the table. All discussions need to be on the table, and it needs to go through the whole process, and I'm willing to have those conversations.
All right, thank you. Jeff, you have 45 seconds.
Yeah, I think the question brought up was LGA. I think like every city, especially Brooklyn Park, we simply do not trust the state government when it comes to LGA. What we did was we moved LGA funding out of our operating budget into our capital. That meant if they decided to cut LGA, or if they decided that one year they weren't going to pay it, it would not affect our services that we offered. So when we take LGA with a grain of salt, we try to put it toward capital expenses, because we know that if they cut it one year, which the state has done more than a few times, that it's not going to affect our ability to put police on the street, clean the streets, and provide services to our community. And so I think one of the things we need to take a closer look at is, I actually agree with Senator Hoffman, that leased vehicle income would be good to move in. We should take revenue that comes from transportation-related endeavors and move it into the fund.
Thank you. John, 45 seconds.
Thank you. And when you talk about the 2013, especially LGA, none of our cities had gotten it since 2004. When 2004 they stopped the LGA piece. The Mayor Lundy was part of the conversation along with Mayor Rybeck and Myron Franz regarding making sure that this legislature bring back the LGA formula. It's not been brought back to the height it was that in prior to 2004. We need to get it back to the level it was in 2002. And I'm trying to think that I'm hearing out of both sides of the mouth here on, I want something yet I don't want something, I voted for something yet I didn't vote for something. And so with that, I think we need to make sure we're very clear about how we're exercising our belief on something and what we're saying.
Great, thank you. We'll move on to our last prepared question. You can expect 3,500 bills next session. Each one is important to someone. When it comes to fiscal policy decisions and priority settings, how would you represent and advocate for your district? John?
3,500 bills, Mayor Nelson. That, I think that only happens on the second year of a biennium. I think the first year, 1,400 bills or something. But that's an awful lot of bills, 3,500. I myself was chief author of a lot of bills. But if you look at them, they were really situated around education and health and human services. Because of the needs of my communities, especially regarding education, we made it a point to go out and make sure that we had bipartisan support. Another one within Health and Human Services, the 5% campaign. When we looked at those that were working with our most vulnerable within our state were not getting paid the wages they should have been getting paid and providing the most complicated services that you can for folks, we went ahead and did the 5% committee, which became a bipartisan effort. And you know what? Jim Ramstad taught me this years ago. John, when it comes to education, when I served on his education advisory panel in 2001 to 2004, he said education and health and human services should be a nonpartisan discussion. It should be about bipartisanship, and that's the only way to get good governance done. My track record shows that, and my track record continuing forward will always show that that's the only way to get really good education and health bills through, is through the bipartisanship on that. And when you look at everybody's putting in 3,500 bills, one of the first things you want to say is who are the co-authors in the House and who are the co-authors within the Senate on that. Let me give you an example. That rate methodology bill is a $3 billion bill that was done for the state of Minnesota. There was only 4 of us on that bill. It was Julie Rosen, who is a Republican senator, myself, and then it was Kim Norton, a Democratic House member, and Jim Abler, a Republican House member. Those 4 were handpicked to do this because of the fact we could get along, because of the intended outcome was good services and supports for the most vulnerable in the state. That's the kind of work I've done. That's the kind of work I'm going to continue to do.
Thank you. Jeff?
I think most important is to, you represent your district. One thing I will never do is draw a line in the sand where I put my district behind that line. I will always make sure that before I sign anything that is what is best for our Senate district. I would never sign a letter saying that I would put the interests of another part of this metro ahead of Senate District 36. I will never sign a bill that says if these people don't get what they are looking for, I'm not going to vote for our stuff. I will never sabotage a bill because of that. When you do things like that, you're basically saying that the interests of our district is less than others. I did not see other senators lining up to say if the Mill Pond doesn't get funded, I won't vote for that bonding bill. If Highway 10 doesn't get widened, I'm not going to vote for that bonding bill. If the Hanson Boulevard at-grade crossing doesn't get done, I'm not going to vote for that bonding bill. I didn't see those letters. So first and foremost, I'm not going to get involved with the partisan politics of drawing lines in the sand so that people cannot get stuff. The failure to get that bonding bill was monumental. The other thing I would do is actually have hearings in my district, town hall meetings, where we actually listen, and don't hide them on days when people are busy or put in the same time when city councils are meeting or things like that. Have it out in the open, let people come in, listen to the harsh comments, because there are many views to that. I have no problem. As mayor, I've sat in many rooms and listened to people talk about issues that means a lot to them. We talked about the light rail, one of those issues which I disagree with my party on. I sat at Maplebrook, where about 200 residents for 2 hours walking through everything. I told them the honest thing, which is I can do 2 things for you. I can tell you the truth, which might make you more mad, or I can lie to you. Everybody wants the truth, and that's all I ever care about is telling the truth, even if it makes people more mad, because they deserve it. And so as your state senator, I will always be there. I will show up, and I will listen whether you agree or disagree with me, because I believe that I owe you that as your elected representative.
Thank you. John, 45 seconds.
Having a myopic view on transportation is not going to get us the blue line. I'm trying to save and trying to build the blue line. The way the Federal Transportation Authority looks at transportation regarding mass transportation in communities like ours and regions like ours has to be a network. We need to build a network. And part of that piece on the transportation and the bonding was $20 million that would have been for our Botno Blue Line, as well as the gateway on the east side of St. Paul. There are $800 million of your federal tax dollars that are sitting in Washington, D.C. that deserve to come back here, and that all we have to do is go get it. If we don't get it, it's going to go to somebody else, and that somebody else is going to be San Diego or Portland. A 2-for-1, in this case an 8-for-1, is a really good investment and return on investment.
Jeff, 45 seconds.
Yeah, and we got nothing. So at the end of the day, that money is going somewhere else because we decided to have that fight. There was an agreement on the table that would have allowed the bonding bill to go through and for the Republicans in the House not to fight the local funding options that eventually became how we did it. And so that kind of clear thinking on how can we get from A to Z where people can have win scenarios on both sides, one would think in an election year we could actually come together and get these things done. As the leader of, again, the largest diverse city in the state, I know all about working across different people, different lines, different languages, different cultures. And I know that it starts with the simple fact of listening and establishing those common goals that everybody wins.
All right, thank you. That's the end of our prepared questions. We'll now take questions from the audience. We'll limit these to 1-minute responses with no rebuttals. So the first question we have is, cities and businesses frequently encounter overlapping authorities, regulations, such as watershed districts, DNR, PCA, etc. How would you address these overlaps? And we will start with you, Jeff.
Thank you. I think the biggest overlap right now is the Met Council. If you are a restaurant owner and you're successful, like Fiesta Cancun, if you go to Brooklyn Park and 85th, they've expanded 3 times. Every time they break through the wall and open up about 10 to 12 more seats, they get to pay the Met Council $25,000. Now, I don't know about you, but when you're talking a small business owner, chains can afford that. Small businesses can't. Sometimes we have these fees and taxes, and all they do is they hamper small businesses, people who are less likely to have access to capital, access to those kind of grants. And so I think we need to take a hard look at some of these programs of what we do. In Brooklyn Park, we invited the businessmen into our city and said, here's a consultant, have at it. We let them write up a plan, and we did not guide them. We let them tell us exactly what they thought worked and what didn't in our city government. And when that came to the city council, we passed it without any debate or changes. And I think that's time for the state to take a look and actually ask business people what would they like to see. And I think they would find they'd get some surprising answers if we actually listened.
All right, thank you. John, same question.
Absolutely. I'll give you a real good example. Everybody likes clean water, right? We can all agree upon that, whether we're going to be fishing, whether they're going to be drinking, whether they're going to be out on our boats, whether they're going to be having fun just hanging out on the Mississippi River. But everybody wants clean water. And the problem we had with this clean water discussion is those entities that you just mentioned, Mayor Nelson, the PCA and the DNR and Bowser, overlapping authorities, was a real issue for many years. And that was why I introduced what is called the Clean Water Accountability Act, which said there's a single source that has to go to. Rather than having a discussion or a debate over who has jurisdiction, we really need to highlight who's got the total accountability on that. And that was, again, a bill that I did in reference to what you were just talking about, Mayor Nelson, and it was bipartisan. And now it is law, and that's what's important. Work bipartisan, create something that's good policy, and now it's law. And that's where we were able to do that. I think you can transition that to other agencies as well. What's your jurisdiction? Who's going to have the ultimate say in that? We did that with the Clean Water Accountability Act. We can do that moving forward on other stuff.
All right, thank you. The next question is, what are your views on the use of TIF as an economic development tool? And we'll start with you, John.
Another prime example is the old downtown Coon Rapids, at the old City Hall, which is now one of our high schools in the Anoka-Hennepin School District. That little piece of property ran into a little problem, and we wanted to extend the TIF on that. And in order to do that, I had a bill that was presented, which was to extend that, and now it was sitting in the conference committee last year, and that's the one that's sitting in the tax bill right now that, of course, got pocket vetoed because of the and/or clause in there. But tax increment financing is important because it really highlights some of those areas that need to be established. And when you look at a city, and there's many examples around the nation that show where it's working well, and there's many examples in Minnesota where it works well. The thing the caution there is somehow you're going to have to pay for some of that TIF finance if it goes on beyond what it's set up for. And so the caution there is, where do other resources come from in order to help develop and pay for those TIF monies that aren't necessarily going to be there?
All right, Jeff.
As mayor, we've used TIF many times. It's an economic tool, not something of the first resort, but as a last resort. What we've tried to do in Brooklyn Park, as evidenced by the $1 billion of development, is focus that on infrastructure. So we've moved gas lines, we've put roads in, we've helped a business take care of things that they would have to pay for, but still has a benefit to the city, not just giving money to the business owners. Another innovative thing that we did was we actually used a housing TIF district to pay $1 million to help build the first teen homeless shelter in the suburbs. People asked, where did we get the money for it? It came out of a housing fund that we had set up for the renewal of affordable housing. And that helped pay for something that is a home of hope for residents, for young teens who are being sexually exploited. So I think that there's innovative things you can do with the TIF district. I do agree that when you do that, you are removing the possibilities for taxes to be put into the system. So you should only do it as little as you need to and use it judiciously.
All right, thank you. Next question is, what's your vision for improving transportation in the North Metro region? And we'll start with you, Jeff.
And this is obviously one issue that I get in trouble with my own party, because I do support the Blue Line. As mayor, I have advocated for those stops. I attend the meetings. I've been through the trenches as working with people to find out how is this going to affect their houses, their homes, their way of life, working with people to make sure that we can mitigate the effects of it. I think one of the biggest challenges, though, is not so much north and south, it's east and west. Right now we have the conditions where bus traffic going from east to south, east to west, is non-existent. So residents, whether they're youth, whether they're low income, whether it's just senior citizens who would like to take the bus to get to Cub or get to Hy-Vee, they can't because there are no buses. Now they can take a bus down to Brooklyn Center or down to Minneapolis and catch the bus back out to get that mile. And so I think what we've been working with the Met Council is to take a look at how we do transportation, not just to the center core, but within the city itself. And for that, we rely on the Met Council to do that.
Thank you. John?
It was a great conversation, and when you look at what we've accomplished regarding the start of the North Star, which drops us down to the Green Line, which moves us the Green Line through all the way to downtown St. Paul, we saw some really innovative things happen along University Avenue. I had a business that we actually had to move from 1953 University Avenue to 1885 University Avenue because of that. But now you're seeing this huge development that's happening along that stretch, which is mixed use. You have residential on the top and you have businesses on the first floor. It's important we start to identify and look at the youth in this world. And the first time in the state of Minnesota you're seeing less and less people interested in getting their driver's license because they want to rely on public transportation. We also need to look at the fact that our elderly population needs to rely on the public transportation as well. Building a good network that's regionally based is important for us. That's why we need to look at our transportation needs when it comes to the Botno Blue Line, along the Green Line, along the Red Line, and the Orange as one huge network, and that's where we need to look at developing that.
All right, we'll do one more question from the audience. What plans do you have to address economic disparity between cities? And we'll start with you, John.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Economic disparity between cities. There's, wow, you talk about fiscal disparity. You look back years and years and years ago, and this guy named Charlie Weaver said, we got to do something in order to equalize, and I believe the word equity came into the first time about, we know people are traveling from Champlin to work in Minneapolis, and they're passing through these other cities, and you say to yourself, okay, the other cities are benefiting from the fact that I'm transporting myself to go to work and then come back in the afternoon. What about how am I going to get some relief, or how am I going to get some equity when it comes to business development, or equity when it comes to property taxes? I think the fiscal disparity addresses that, and it's one that not a lot of states understand. I think we're the only one, and we were the first in the nation to really look at something like that. That thing needs to be really, really protected and cared for, and I knew that was an issue a couple of years ago on that, and I think we can expand on what Charlie Weaver started years ago on that, and make sure that there's equity within our communities utilizing that formula.
All right, thank you. Jeff?
I do think fiscal disparities is a good tool. Brooklyn Park is a net recipient. So for us, it does help provide money that we use, because we are more the bedroom community that provides workers for other cities. I think another aspect that we need to do is more regional planning. I don't mean Met Council regional planning. I mean things like North Metro Mayors Association, where we get together and we talk about those issues affecting Champlin, Brooklyn Park, things like 109th, where we're working together to get things fixed in a collaborative way. Things like, as we plan out the rail, how is this going to affect Maple Grove, Brooklyn Center? How can they make sure that they readjust their transportation corridors so they take advantage of the fact there's now a large rail system going nearby? And so I think those kind of dialogue, I think that mayors and cities, we understand that because we don't have necessarily all the resources, and we have to play well together to maximize what abilities and strengths that we have and the money that we have.
All right, thank you. That's the last question for our forum. Before we close, we're going to give our candidates a chance to give a 60-second closing statement, and we'll start with you, Jeff.
First, I'd like to thank everybody for hosting this. It is a great opportunity to get together, have a dialogue, talk about issues, and have some good, robust discussion, which I think is healthy. I think my biggest endeavor running for state senate is to get results. As mayor, that has been my sole focus, is if you're not getting the results done, it's time to get out of the way. As mayor, I talked about lowering crime, bringing in development, talked about bringing the community together. As a state senator, I want to do the same thing, which is focus on those issues. I want to deliver tax relief and actually deliver it, not make it to the governor's pocket and have it walked off, but I mean actually deliver it back to the people's pockets themselves. I want to make sure that our bonding bills get passed so that we can help talk about this transportation network that needs so much work, yet is so underfunded, in part because we simply aren't getting the stuff done. I want to talk about being a representative who comes and listens whether someone has something great to say or something really horrible. I want to hear those stories because those are the things that we need to take back to the Capitol and make sure that we do not forget who we represent, which is the district, people in this district.
Thank you. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Nelson, and to the North Metro Mayors Association for holding this forum. It is a great opportunity to share our concerns and our wishes and our hopes and our dreams for our communities. And in 2012, I came to you and I said, look, our education system is breaking down. It's broke. The state said to us, borrow money to keep your schools open and only give half the kids in kindergarten an opportunity to succeed, and the other half, well, they're going to have to pay for it. Well, we brought forward all-day, everyday kindergarten. That's a huge, huge benefit to this area. When we talk about keeping property taxes low, we delivered 2013, $7.4 million to the 3 communities I represent. The community in Brooklyn Park raised their taxes by 28% in the same years that those monies were given, and that was paid. That money was supposed to keep your property taxes low and keep your services up. I think fiscal responsibility is started here with me and will stay with me and will end with me, and I want to thank you very much for all this opportunity to talk about our future and what we hope for, and thanks for letting me be here tonight.
All right. Thank you very much. That brings the close of this forum. We'll take a short break, and then we'll come back with the House District 36A forum. Gentlemen, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you.